Hello, my name is Michael Fine, and welcome to the fourth CSS lesson, where we'll be talking about backgrounds and gradients. So, on to our first topic, backgrounds, specifically single color backgrounds. There are 6 ways to do this, and I'll go through each and every one of them, and you'll get to see what it actually looks like in practice in this HTML file. So let's get into it. The first one is using the inbuilt colors. So let's say I have something like this in my CSS file. I could just say background color red. What I'm essentially doing here is applying the inbuilt color red as a style attribute to the body tag, which for me is the entire web page. Now the second one is HSL. What this stands for is hue, saturation, lightness. Right? So what you would do is you have to enter 3 parameters. Your hue, which is in degrees, from 0 to 360. Let's go with 180. Saturation, which is a percentage, let's say 50%. And lightness, let's say 75%, because that's also a percentage. And all you would have to do is write that there, or right after the background color attribute is being applied, and this would be a color. The benefits of this is that you get to control the saturation and the lightness. The next way is through the RGB spectrum, which, if you don't know, RGB stands for red, green, blue. And as you can probably tell, the first number basically tells the web browser what percentage of red there will be, up to a maximum of 255. It can't go negative, by the way, so 0 is the minimum. All you would have to do is paste this in this background color attribute, and this would set it to a certain color. The fourth one is actually still the RGB spectrum, but as percentages. So let's say you want to make a color that's 75% red, 50% green, and 75% blue. This would actually get you some color, and you can actually paste that in here. That's another way. The fifth way is actually something slightly more difficult. That's with hexadecimal stuff. Essentially, hexadecimal encoding is basically a way of encoding information. For us, we're going to use it to represent a color. And I actually have a hexadecimal encoding written here. It's 6 letters and numbers, and this actually represents a dark red. Just remember, it's 6 letters and numbers, and that's why it's called hexadecimal. It's a way of encoding numerical information. The next way is actually also using hexadecimals, which I won't be using just because there's a bit of a learning curve. You can learn about it on your own, but I would prefer to use these just so it's simpler for you to understand. The next method is essentially hexadecimals plus 2 more values, and this second value is opacity. This way allows you to control the opacity but it's worth noting that you can also just do this separately. This is 50% opacity. This is 0.75, 75% opacity, 100% opacity, 1, or just normal opacity. That's the 3 different ways to change a background color. And I'm now going to get into gradients. Essentially what this is 2 colors being blended together over a space. You'll see more of what I mean in practice when I show you the website, but for now there are 3 kinds of gradients: a linear gradient, a radial gradient, and a conical gradient. Now, to actually apply these gradients, you have to use background image, and let's say I wanted to apply a linear gradient. You would type in linear gradient and then whatever color you want. For example, I'll use inbuilt stuff, but you can also do it using the RGB spectrum and all of these, and even with hexadecimals. But I'm going to use these for simplicity. Just know that you can also use others. And basically, if you want to change the type of gradient, all you have to do is change this value. Radial gradient, yeah. And if you want it to be conical, you can change it to conical. So let's show you how this looks like in practice. So I've created my HTML file, and the first thing I'm going to do is actually link my style sheet. Actually, sorry, rel equals style sheet, and you have to actually reference the real style sheet, which I will now create. CSS lesson4.css. Now, as always, if it was in a different folder, I would have to actually get the path to that file from the HTML file. But because it's in the same directory, I don't have to do that. And as you can see, VS Code is recognizing the CSS file. So let's actually make some divs. The reason I'm going to do that is to show off another topic that I covered previously, which is ID selectors. Because I'm going to give each div an ID, and I'm going to apply a gradient to them. Let's say div1. Actually, I can just copy this. Oops. And then div2, div3. So now I should be able to, yeah, you can see it's updated. And now what I'm going to do is actually show you that this works by actually applying a background color of, oh, I don't know, aqua. That'll do. Save that. It should reload. And yeah, as you can see, it's aqua colored. Now I'm going to actually apply a gradient. I'm going to use an ID selector because I've assigned each div an ID. If you don't remember, I covered these in a previous video. If you don't remember, feel free to check that out. And I'm referencing this ID, and I'm going to use the background image attribute, and I'm going to say Yeah, it knows. Linear gradient, red and blue. Okay. So let's see if it works. Oh look, there is no change. And I'm going to explain why. You see, if I look over here, the div that I just made doesn't actually have any space that it's occupying. You can see it's 775 by 0 pixels. So what I need to actually do is allocate a width of, I don't know, let's say 100 pixels. Always remember your semicolons. And a height of another 100 pixels. If I can spell that right. Always remember to assign widths and heights to your divs. It's another property, a style property. This is so you can actually have your divs taking up space. And you'll see what this actually means when I pull up CSS lesson 4, and you can see a linear gradient. You can also see, yeah, its dimensions are updated. And this is kind of what a linear gradient is. You're blending red and blue in sort of a line. That's how a linear gradient looks. Now, let's apply another gradient. This time, let's apply a radial gradient. Let's say with the RGB spectrum. I'll make it 255. Oh, that's blue. Let's say 180. Okay, that looks better. And again, let's say with the percentages, so you can actually see that in action. That's a lighter purple. I don't really like that. Let's turn down the blue. Okay, that looks more noticeable. Now let's see what happens. Oh, it appears that div isn't taking up any space, so we need to update its width and height. We can set the width to be pretty much anything we want. I'm just going to make it massive, just because. And I'll give it a height of 100 pixels. Okay. Let's go there. And as you can see, that's a radial gradient. You can see the colors are blended in what looks like a circle. Actually, I'll change the width to 100 pixels just so it's easier to see the circle. Yeah, that looks like a circle. It's blending the colors outward in a radius. That's why it's called a radial gradient. Now, if I go to the third div, I'm going to give it a conical gradient. Let's say, let's go with blue, red, and some RGB values. Let's say 100, 250. That looks good. And the funny thing about conical gradients, which you've probably already noticed, is they can take in pretty much a variable amount of colors, and you'll see why. Let's just enter the hexadecimal one I wrote down. I don't think this is the same one. It's hard to remember these. Oops. Yeah, it should be a pretty dark red. And then let's actually set a width of 100 pixels by a height of another 100 pixels. My mistake. They're actually called Conical Gradient in the CSS. Yeah, you can see why it takes in a variable amount of colors. You can pretty much put in as many colors as you want. Let's put in a random HSL color because I haven't used that. Let's go with 180 by 50% by 75%. And that's a light blue. Interesting. Yeah, it's added that. So this is why it's called a conical gradient. It looks like it's a cone. It's blending them outwards like a cone. So yeah, that's the main substance of the lesson. I hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you again in the next one. Goodbye.